In this example, I want to show you how the screen replacement tool in Photoshop, which is new at the start of the year, works. Now, this is a pretty, straightforward picture here in terms of the sky, very overcast, um, pretty good exposure. It's not too, it's used exposure compensation, so there's some pretty good detail in the underwing here with the fish. This was coming into the tree across the street, so let's see what we can do. First step is to take this and duplicate it and make it a smart object, and then we'll work first in Lightroom or Camera Raw. So there's the changes in Camera Raw. So let's just take a look at that real quick. Didn't do too much, didn't change the temperature, opened up the whites a little bit, so it was slightly underexposed, a little texture, clarity, and that's about it. Let's just zoom in and see how it is for sharpness. You can see the sharpness, it's okay, and there's a fair amount of noise. And we'll take care of that in the last step. So cancel out of that. Next step is to improve the color balance in here. I didn't really like that, so basically what we're doing here is we'll pull that up. You can see up here we added a little bit of yellow, -13 into the yellow, and just a touch of magenta to warm that up. So there's before, there's after, just taking that blue underwing tone out of there. Now let's replace the sky. So first, I've already done it. So first I'm going to just create a new stamped layer, and we'll do it from scratch. So it's literally as easy as coming over to Edit, Sky Replacement. Takes a second. There, it's done. Now it's not really done. So this happens to be one of my skies. Let me just show you. There are, skies that have been put in before, pre-done by Adobe. I would encourage you all to take pictures of skies, import them. You import them down here. There's a plus sign. There's a folder structure that you can do. And I'll show you here what mine looks like in Lightroom in a moment. But so I've chosen this one, and let's see what we can do with it. So let's just start. My observations are it's not as straightforward as just pressing that button. So we have some options here. And the first one I would say that is important is the scale option. And what the scale option does is allow you, and we'll just do this, is to scale the photo up. So what you need to think about, and I think this is where sometimes the skies look really unrealistic. If you were to put an image in here, and let's just see if we can find, let's pick this one. That doesn't look really all that realistic. I mean, we have the foreground or the horizon down here, the puffy clouds. And so, you could perhaps improve that. But this is where scale comes in, because if we're taking this with a 600 or an 800 millimeter lens as we are here, the clouds are going to be a lot more fuzzy, and definitely a lot more along the lines of, you have to think of where they would be if we were just to take a 600 millimeter shot of the sky behind it. So I think that's, now you can move this around. That certainly looks a little better than we had the first time. So that is probably the biggest thing I think that I've seen. So let's just go through and look at some of this stuff. You can shift the edge of the mask. In other words, the sky to the bird. You can adjust the sky, like we can make the sky brighter, for example. That matches a little bit with the bird. And of course, the key thing is matching the temperature of the bird to the temperature of the sky. So you might warm that up so you can get them. And all of a sudden, things are starting to blend together. And then there's this foreground down here. We don't really have a foreground, so we won't go into that. But if we were replacing the sky in a landscape, you would want to play with the foreground and adjust the lighting and color of the foreground and where it meets the horizon of the sky. So let's just say okay here. And let's look at what happens over here on the side. It makes a group, a sky replacement group, and it has a number of things in here. It has that foreground color, the foreground lighting, the sky temperature, sky brightness, all of these in a group, so you can go in and play with these. The one I would suggest you play with and look at is this sky mask. So let's just do that. And right away we see where the issues are. So let's just blow that up a little bit. Does a pretty good job. You can see how it's blending. There's some, it's not, there's some light gray around it, and that's where it's blending the bird back into that sky. But on the ospreys, what I've noticed is you see all these white tail feathers down here. It's thinking that's sky. So you have to go in and use your tools. You can take this mask into select and mask, and you can do any touch-ups you might need to do. So you can use the tools there, save it, and make your corrections. So that would be the one thing I would suggest you do. Also looking at the very edge. Let's get out of this. Let's see how it did. Let's just zoom in really close on the wing of the bird. It did pretty good on this this example here. There's no halos around here. But the one thing I would encourage you to do is look at that selection and make sure that there is no halo here. You have the opportunity to go in and adjust that mask by shifting the edge one way or the other, or if it still doesn't work, there are some other techniques for getting rid of that halo. But that's one thing I would absolutely say, don't just be satisfied with pressing the button, replace the sky. Go in and check. And you can see how noisy this particular image is. So let's get rid of this. And we'll go to where I replace the sky with my sky. And you can see on this one, there is actually a little bit of a halo around there. So our next step then is to merge that into its own layer. And I actually went in and did some manual removal of that edge just by cloning around the edge lightly. But I still didn't think the bird matched into the sky all that well. So I added a curves adjustment layer, and you can see what happens here. It brightens everything up. We could have corrected that back when we were actually in the sky replacement group, but you could still do it after the fact. And so at this point, I'm pretty happy with it. You can see how the scale of the clouds is appropriate for the bird. It doesn't look crazy. And now let's see if we can get rid of the noise. The other thing we did in this particular image, and forgot to mention it, but when we stamp that layer up, you can see that one of the issues was the eye of the bird, and we lightened that with the dodge tool. So you can see here quite a difference there. So now let's go. We'll just stamp this, and now we'll run Denoise. We already have a layer there with Denoise on it, but let's just do it in real time here. We'll turn on auto. Let's see if we can go into 200%. And you can see it's trying to increase the sharpness, but not really doing all that much on the noise. And that's one of the things I find happens a lot with the automatic setting. And so, you may be happy with the sharpness at this point, or even want to cut it back, because it's not really all that necessary. It's a pretty sharp image, but for sure we want to up the denoise. And so this is where you have to look at your detail and see where does it start to cut into the detail that you're trying to preserve. And yet it's going to take out this noise over here in the feathers, and particularly in the underwing. And I think that over here you see, if we move back over here, pretty nice improvement. So we could apply this at that point, and what you're going to get is this final shot here. And, from going from an image that I'm not too happy with, but is a consequence of the particular day in the sky, to something a little more usable. So in the next example that we'll look at, we're actually going to do this on a landscape. We're not going to replace the sky. We're going to use the sky replacement selection process to improve an existing sky. So let's take a look at that.